All right. It appears that we are live. I'm just gonna wait a little bit to see if anybody's gonna join, and then we'll get started. So, pretty much today we're gonna be talking about the week 3 of college football. We're gonna be going over some of the big games and upsets that took place, and yeah. So let's just give it a few minutes. And I guess while we're waiting, I'll start us off with a question for the viewers. What is a game that you think was like the biggest upset? Which one do you think was the biggest upset? Because there was a lot this week. You had Clemson, you had Georgia, Tennessee. You had Texas struggling a little bit. A&M beat Notre Dame. That's a pretty big one. And yeah, I mean, there's a bunch, honestly. Vanderbilt beat South Carolina. So yeah, I mean, there are quite a few, and I'm curious as to what you guys think would be the biggest one so far. You know what? I'm gonna create a poll for everybody so they can type in what they think as the live stream is going on. So I'll do Clemson versus Georgia Tech as one option, and then we got A&M versus Notre Dame, and then we have. All right, if anybody's joining, just give me like 1 sec. I'm creating a poll right now for you guys to interact with as the live stream goes on. And we're just going to be talking about all the big games this week. So be ready to have some fun. Okay. All right, once we're live, we're going to get going. Or once somebody joins, we're going to start doing it. Okay. So I think we're going to start now. So just an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be going over what happened with Clemson this week, just their whole situation really in general, what to make of the Georgia versus Tennessee game, what we should be thinking about Texas at this point in the season. They've had a pretty rough season so far. I mean, not rough, but, they're kind of struggling a little bit. So I'm going to analyze them. And I want to talk about Miami some and their wins this season and how they're looking. Analyzing the Notre Dame A&M game and just kind of giving my thoughts on it and, what I want to make of it and how it will impact the future of this college football season. And then lastly, I want to talk about LSU and their season so far just the game against Florida and then also just overall their wins against Clemson and just look into that a little bit. So we're going to start with what happened with Clemson. So Clemson lost to Georgia Tech, and it was kind of close. It was at Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech just ultimately got the win. And the first thing I want to talk about is Dabo's recruiting issues. So this has been an issue that, it's kind of been brought up a lot in the offseason. You've probably heard. Pretty much Dabo just has not really been great at recruiting. Clemson has a really top-tier program, or at least they did, maybe. I don't know if that's changing, but, Clemson has a really good program, great stadium, great fans, and it seems like they aren't really capitalizing on NIL in the future of college football, quite frankly. I think that, Clemson's holding back a little bit. They're not used to like Dabo, especially. I just don't think he's used to all of this transfer portal stuff. And I think that it's hurting Clemson a lot, actually, because, while they're still getting good talent from South Carolina, North Carolina, like states around them, like they're still recruiting well, but they aren't getting any transfers to fill in gaps that they need each offseason, which, as you know, I mean, Ohio State's had to do it. Um, and pretty much every team has had to do it. Notre Dame, Texas, they all have to bring in guys. If you want to succeed, like Clemson wanted to succeed. I mean, they were ranked number 4 in the preseason, but they just didn't bring anybody in, and you can tell that they still have some issues that aren't really going to be addressed for the season, which is going to hurt them. So I think Dabo's recruiting issues are starting to show, and his inability to do that is definitely hurting them. Cade Klubnik, their quarterback. I mean, he's been a Heisman favorite for a while, but I don't think he will be after this week because, I mean, he's all right. He's not a bad player. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he did have two turnovers against Georgia Tech, and he didn't really seem like he had that energy and hype as you would have hoped from one of the best, well, supposedly best quarterbacks in the league. You'd hope that going into an away game on the road, tough environment. Honestly, that was a packed stadium. You would hope that your quarterback would be able to have a little bit more confidence and a little bit more swagger to him, if you know what I'm saying. It just seemed like he didn't, and I think that hurt them because, you need a leader, especially when you're on the road, and I think Cade Klubnik just isn't really built for that yet at this point in his career, and he should be, which is I think a big reason why they lost. You can't be fumbling against Georgia Tech, you can't be making mistakes like that. 2 turnovers, you can't win a game with 2 turnovers. Really, it's very difficult to do so. And yeah, just little mistakes like that just cost them. And I think Klubnik is just overrated, quite frankly. So that's what I think about that side of the ball. But I'm gonna get to Haynes King a little bit. Haynes King looked tough. That's what I'll say about him. He looked tough. He's not the best player in college football. He's not the most talented. He's not the most skilled. But you can make an argument that he is the most tough and physical quarterback in the whole college football league. I mean, the way he plays is just so cool to watch because you can tell that, he brings physicality. He's a leader, and those are things you want from your quarterback. You want your quarterback to be able to lead, when games get tough and it gets down to the wire and you need that 4th down conversion. That's the guy you want. So, yeah, I mean, Haynes King, despite having kind of mediocre stats this game, I think the team was able to rally behind him and trust in him, trust in the coaching staff, and I think that's what got them the win. I don't think they're necessarily more talented than Clemson. I think they're just more tough, and I think that's starting to be a common factor in all of college football nowadays. So that's definitely an attribute teams overlook, and I think Georgia Tech really does it well, which is why they beat Clemson. So moving on to the next game I want to talk about Georgia and Tennessee, the big one this week. First of all, I just want to preface that both of the teams were very good. Especially the offenses, I think both of them looked great. The defenses might need some work though. Some of the coverages just kind of looked bad and sloppy at times. And I think that, it's early in the season and that was really the first test for both of them. So, maybe it's just because it was that, but you don't want to be like that going into November, really. So defenses need some work, but I mean, both quarterbacks looked great. Offenses looked great. I mean, really, both of the teams are good, still really great teams, despite that game. I mean, it was very close, as it usually is, I feel like, with Tennessee nowadays. But, yeah, it was a very close game. So I just want to preface that, and I don't think either of these teams are bad. So one thing that I took away from this game is that Georgia can win high-scoring games. Going into this, they only put up 28 against Austin Peay before this game. And, you see that and you think, okay, this game, Georgia's going to have to really be really well defensively, have a great defensive game, and, prevent Joey Aguilar from, throwing for 5 touchdowns, scoring 5 touchdowns. And, if you were to look at the stats before this game and see that he did have 5 total touchdowns, you would think Georgia lost. Like, they're not going to be able to compete with that. But it turns out Georgia can compete with that. That was a tough game. That was on the road for them. Hostile environment, one of the biggest stadiums in America, and they won in a shootout. I mean, that's really all you can ask for. The offense looked great. I mean, any worries with Stidman? I think there are pretty much none. Like he looks great, better than I thought, better than a lot of people thought, and that's good to see from Georgia if you're a Georgia fan because you know you were worried about the offense. I think a lot of people were, but I think that just showed you that they're fine. Obviously, I mean they scored like 44 points, so I think they're right. I think the both teams could easily make the playoffs still. Um, I don't think either. I think this game will be good for Georgia, but I don't think it'll kill Tennessee, especially in this new playoff format. Like Tennessee's still gonna have some tough games, obviously, but I think they're gonna win a good amount of them based on how good they looked. And yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how the season plays out with Tennessee and Georgia. I mean, obviously they just got a great win. I wouldn't be surprised if they're essentially locks for the playoffs at this point. I mean, I'm not gonna say that they're locks, but like if they just win a couple, like 1 or 2 more big games, then they're gonna be fine. And I think they looked really good. So, uh, honestly, that was a great game. And I think despite a loss, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're still pretty confident in your team. Definitely need some work, but yeah, you're still pretty confident if you're a Tennessee fan. The next thing I want to talk about is should we be worried about Texas yet? So Texas started the season on the road at Ohio State and lost 14-7. Um, to be honest, Arch Manning did not look great that game. Obviously, only had 7 points, but just some of the basic stuff you would expect from a Manning, he didn't really do, and that's sort of been a consistent theme throughout these 3 weeks. Arch Manning just seems like he's struggling to, excel as we've seen other quarterbacks do, like John Mateer, Julian Sayin, Bryce Underwood. All these guys have at least shown flashes of being great, but Arch Manning, I'm still kind of not seeing that yet. And playing UTEP, you would expect a little bit better of a performance from him. I mean, he hasn't been terrible, but he's definitely not been great. And I think some concerns do arise from that. Steve Sarkisian is a very offensive-minded coach. He likes to, you know, use the offense a lot. I don't think he's. I mean, obviously Texas has one of the best defenses in the country. I'm not that's pretty well known, but Arch Manning, I think you would hope would be a little better by now because I feel like Steve Sarkisian is probably not liking that they've struggled to put up as many points as maybe they should have, and I think Quinn Ewers was definitely taken for granted. I'll just say that because Arch Manning, he's definitely having some growing pains, and I think he'll get better as the season progresses. I do think that he's a good dual threat still, but I think he's not bad. But I think the preseason hype made him seem that he was way better than he actually is. He's just an average quarterback right now. I mean, that's the truth. He's just an average quarterback. He's not a Heisman contender. And, people are going to have to realize that. And, maybe once you see that Texas just has an average offense, quite frankly, I mean, it's not that great. You'll start to analyze them better and start to see that, yeah, they might be a little overrated. Their rushing attack is still good. That's kind of keeping their offense moving. Ohio State struggled a little bit against that at times. But I think we're just going to have to wait until they play SEC schools because you're not going to really know what they're like until they play, teams like Florida is coming up in a couple weeks. That'll be a good game to see, how they match up against them. I'll talk about Florida in a little bit later, but yeah, I would start to have some concern for Texas. And yeah, I don't really think that they're a top 10 team as of now. Maybe if they start proving themselves in SEC conference play, might be able to push them up a little bit. But right now, I think they're slightly overrated. And Arch Manning better be getting better, within the next couple of weeks because they need him to play well. And if he doesn't, then quite frankly, the SEC play might not go that great for them. So we're just going to have to see how that goes. But right now, I would have a little bit of concern if I'm a Texas fan. Definitely not as confident as I would be last year, for example. Moving on, though, I want to talk about Miami because historically, in these past 5 to 10 years, Miami is one of those teams that's well, they're ranked in the top 10, but are they really going to be a top 10? Like, we know they have the talent, we know they have the transfers, the recruiting, but can they actually put together a good team that can win games? And most of the times the answer has been no. And this year it seems like this might be the year Miami's back. And I know people hate to say it, but yeah, I think Miami might be back. Uh, they beat Notre Dame and they beat USF. Both were ranked teams. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how they progress over the season. But yeah, Miami is looking very solid right now. I think USF was overrated. I'm not going to act like they were a top 10 team. Like, they were probably a little overrated. Seeing how Florida's been playing recently, and Boise State isn't that great either this year. So they really should be like an unranked team, which they are now. But still, nonetheless, they didn't just beat them by like a touchdown or two. They beat them by like 30, and that's something you'd want to see out of Miami. Some teams have struggled, like Texas, for example. They've struggled to beat teams that they should beat by a lot, and Miami is out here beating USF by like 30 at home. So that's what you'd like to see. I mean, Carson Beck has looked much better than I thought he would be. Um, he threw for three touchdowns. He did have two interceptions, but he's definitely seeming, and he also had 340 passing yards. So it seems like he's more of a gunslinger than I thought he'd be. I kind of think of Carson Beck as like, he's kind of average at both things. At Georgia, he wasn't terrible, but I think his wide receivers and tight ends helped him look better than he might have actually been. But I mean, Carson Beck, he's looked great. I mean, the chemistry he's formed with Miami's wide receivers over the offseason is honestly way better than I thought it'd be. And I think he's really the reason that they're succeeding. Um, their offense has always been good, but I think they're just way more, how do I say this? Like, they're just way more efficient on offense. They look better. The offensive line is playing way better. And I think that helps the defense in return, which is something that, the defense has kind of been a struggle of Miami's for a while. And I think Mario Cristobal has finally figured out, how to work on that better. And I think Carson Beck is definitely helping. The wide receiver play has been great. Like I said, I mean, they have great talent all around. So that also has helped Carson Beck out a lot. But yeah, I would say Miami's legit. And I know that just because they're ranked 4, like, obviously you think they're legit. But like I said, in these past seasons, they've been ranked very highly and then just start to fall off and lose games that they shouldn't. And all these things that, aren't very typical of top teams in the country besides Miami. So yeah, I do think Miami is legit. And I think that their defense is finally stepping up, which they need. And yeah, I mean, Miami looks really good, if I'm being honest. They could honestly be higher than other teams ahead of them, like LSU or Penn State even, I would consider. But yeah, Miami is legit. That's all I know. And then I want to go over to the Notre Dame and Texas A&M game because that was a very crazy game. I mean, Notre Dame's drama, still being ranked. Like, what do we make of that? So the first question I'm asking is, can Notre Dame make the playoffs? And honestly, I think they're going to win out. Their hardest games are USC and at Arkansas. At Arkansas could be a sleeper game that, I mean, Arkansas is obviously not like a top SEC team, but they're still pretty good. And it's at Arkansas, which they actually have a pretty decent home crowd. So they might lose that one, but I could see them beating USC. I mean, pretty much they pretty much have to win out at this point to have a chance at playoffs. If they have 3 losses, they're not making it. Even though they have 2 losses to very good teams, like, yeah, they need to win out. And I think they can. So if they do, then there is a scenario where they get in just because, I mean, their losses, they do have the best losses out of any team at that point. And, they're just going to have to hope that I think, teams like Bama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, even some of those like mid-teens teams right now ranked in the rankings, they're going to need to drop a couple games, and Notre Dame's just going to have to find a way to sneak in there and just win out. So really, if you're Notre Dame, you just have to win. That's like all you have to do, but you also just have to kind of get lucky. You can't really control that, but they don't play in a conference championship game, which hurts them because they can't get another win against a ranked team. So that's going to be hard. And if they do make it, they're going to be like one of the last seeds, if I had to guess. So yeah, they're just going to have to, they can make the playoffs. They're not completely out yet, but it's going to be kind of a long shot and it's going to be difficult for sure. Second thing I wanted to point out is that Marcel Reed looked really good. He had 360 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I thought he just handled the pressure well in a tough environment. Being able to put up 40 in South Bend is not an easy task. He's still kind of young for a quarterback, not very experienced, but he's looked very good. And I think that the way he handled pressure is very good to see if you're a Texas A&M fan, because you still have to go on the road to Texas later in the season. That'll be a crazy game. You have to go to LSU as well. So the fact that he was able to handle a very tough crowd is a very good sign, and I think he's looked very good. I think he's a good quarterback. He definitely looks improved from last year. Getting benched against Notre Dame last year, that was crazy, but he's definitely improved. And yeah, I think Marcel Reed has looked very good. And then the final thing I want to say about this is that I think A&M, they're not going to be the most talked about team in the SEC, but I think they could be very good this year and maybe get to the SEC championship. I mentioned that Texas game. I think they can beat Texas. I don't think Texas is all that great. That'll be the last game of the year, so we'll know more by then. But I think A&M can beat Texas, and I think they can beat LSU too. I'll get to that in a sec, but uh, A&M is going to be a sneaky good team. They have a great win now at Notre Dame. That's a crazy good win for them out of conference. So if they just do well in their conference, they can drop a game, maybe two. But if they just lose like one game and beat, Texas maybe, or some highly ranked team, then yeah, they're gonna be great. And I think they can make the playoffs this year for sure. I mean, Marcel Reed looked really good. Their defense was, definitely needing improvements, but overall they looked pretty good and definitely better than I thought they would be. So everybody needs to look out for Texas A&M. I know it seems obvious that the team that just beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame should be looked out for, but everybody's still talking about other teams in the league right now. And I think that uh, Texas A&M is kind of going under the radar. So just watch out for Texas A&M. That's all I know. And then finally, I want to get to the LSU game. So my conclusion is that LSU is overrated. I don't think they're the third best team in the country. I don't think they're a bad team, but I don't think they're the third best team. And let me explain why. So they played at a home night game against Florida. And as you all probably know, if you're watching this, DJ Lagway threw 5 interceptions. And what did LSU do? Keep in mind, they're probably more of an offensive team. Garrett Nussmeier is very talented, very good quarterback, very experienced. Came back for his senior year. He's been in LSU for a while. That's what I'm trying to get at. They have great wide receivers. They did lose a great O lineman, but and Will Campbell, but they should still be very good on offense, and their defense is still pretty good. They had 5 interceptions, which is definitely a good sign. That's like the one positive takeaway I'd say, besides winning the game from LSU, is that their defense did look very good. But I still think they're just a little overrated. They had 5 interceptions against Florida, who just lost to USF at home, and they only put up 20 points. I don't really care what team you are. If you're Navy or LSU, you should be able to score more than 20 points with 5 turnovers. That is insane. The fact that you can only score 20 points with 5 turnovers, that is not a good sign. That was a home crowd at night. That's not what you want to see, especially from the number 3 team. And that's why I don't really think LSU is the top 3 team. That's why I think, Miami and teams like Texas A&M could upset them later on. So I would not be surprised if LSU drops outside of the top 10 by the end of the season. I just don't think they're that great, and I think time will tell. But yeah, LSU I think is overrated. Florida, Florida's just cooked. Billy Napier probably going to get fired by the end of the season. He's just not off to a great start, and they have a gauntlet of a schedule too. They're not going to win many games. Maybe they might go like 4-8. I don't know, but it's not going to be good for Florida this season, and he's definitely getting fired. Yeah, Florida is just a disaster. I wouldn't be surprised if Flagway transfers out or something, but yeah, I could see LSU back to LSU. I could definitely see them losing to A&M, Bama, Ole Miss, or Vanderbilt. That might sound crazy to say, but just give it a couple weeks, and I bet you'll look back at this and be like, yeah, LSU is not that great. They only beat like 2-win Florida by 10 with 5 interceptions. It's just hard to look at that and say, yeah, LSU is a top 3 team. You can just not say that. Yeah, I do not see LSU as being a top 3 team, and I think they're overrated. Maybe top 10, definitely not top 3. So that's gonna conclude my live stream about this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it because I enjoyed making these things. I'm sorry I wasn't here and not making as many videos the past couple months, but I will be back. Um, I might not be able to do as many, but I'm hoping that I can keep this podcast running and grow it how I hope so. So thank you all for watching this. Podcast or video will be coming out either Wednesday or Thursday. And yeah, enjoy. I'll see you guys later.